Welcome to Faith Over Pharma, the podcast for couples trying to conceive after a vasectomy reversal. I'm Susan Gladstein, holistic reproductive health practitioner, functional nutrition specialist, and your fertility detective. Around here, we talk about all the things mainstream medicine often misses and the faith that it takes to keep going when you wanted a baby like yesterday. If you're tired of being told to wait, to retest, or just move straight to IVF without anyone looking at the full picture, then you're in the right place. Most people think burnout only happens when you're doing too much, but sometimes it happens when you're doing too many things that pull you away from what actually matters. I mean, you can love your mission, love helping people, love building something meaningful, and still quietly find yourself overwhelmed, overcommitted, overexhausted, wondering why the success that you prayed for suddenly feels so heavy. Today's conversation is for the woman who feels like she's carrying a lot right now. Maybe your schedule is full, your brain never shuts off, or you've started realizing that somewhere along the way, the healthy hustle turned into survival mode. My guest today has spent decades in the speaking world, helping people use their voice in a way that creates real impact without constantly chasing the next opportunity, which I love. Antoniette hosts the SPEAKPact Podcast, which is ranked in the top 10%. And she's also the CEO of the WPC Speakers Global Agency, where she and her team help speakers and thought leaders get booked for meaningful, high-value opportunities without the constant hustle and burnout. And I'm really excited for this conversation because she works with people who are carrying big messages, big callings, and big responsibility. And I know that there's going to be so much wisdom here for the woman who really wants to steward her voice, her influence, her business, and her assignment well without losing herself in the process. So welcome to the show. I'd love to just start with your story, how you got into this work. What has God been teaching you throughout your journey of using your voice, building influence, and helping others share their message?
Thank you, Susan. I love the work that you're doing with Faith Over Pharma. I think it's such an important message. And of course, I'm all about creating the biggest impact with the power of your voice possible. And you're a perfect model of that. So thank you for having me here. Golly, I don't even know where to start. I can start way back or I can start pretty recent, but I'll touch on way back. As a preteen, I was diagnosed with stage 4, and it was found too late. So thankfully, I mean, it didn't seem like a blessing at the time, but because it was found so late, mainstream couldn't help me. So we used some very unconventional ways to save my life. I mean, at the time of diagnosis, they gave me 6 weeks. I didn't walk for 2 years. And then they said that I would never be able to carry a child because cancer basically ate my pelvic area. I walk normal. I am a climber, and I carried a baby who is now in his 40s or approaching 40. So the power of faith is a definite. I remember being on the operating table at one point. There was a danger of bleeding out. So they didn't put me under for whatever reason. And it was a university hospital. So the walls were lined with students watching all of this happening. And it was very hard to get through because there was a big monitor showing everything that was happening. And I was feeling some of it. And I just started singing the hymns that I knew from church. And there was not a dry eye that came out of that room. And I just, faith is the only thing that got me through. And just divine happenings, right, saved my life. So when I left that hospital, I was in the hospital for a year straight as a kid, hundreds of miles away from my family. And then another year, mostly in and then sometimes out until, kind of tapered off. Those kids in that children's ward became my family. Many of them were considered the lucky ones. I really don't like to say the word, but their diagnoses were caught, quote unquote, in time for them to get the more mainstream medicine. And I remember seeing what they went through. I did not have to go through what they were going through. It was pretty horrific to witness and hear as you're trying to sleep at night, the agony that they were going through. And many of them didn't make it. And me, the quote unquote unlucky one, because there was very little hope for me and they were just experimenting, I made it. So when I did finally get to leave that hospital and feel the sun on my face and know I wasn't going to have to go back, at the very, very young age, I said to myself, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just said I was going to be their voices. They would live on. through my voice, through my life somehow. And I didn't really know what that was going to look like. So advance very fast forward. I started out with a business and PR degree and CIS, computer information systems, when you actually had to write code to turn the computer on. That's the only set of classes I ever got C's in was that. But I didn't know exactly what I was going to do with it. And in pretty short order, I was producing events. One of my biggest events, which was a worldwide event, were the Texas Natural Wellness Expos. So I learned a lot from the doctors that would come from all over the world, doctors and practitioners and health professionals that would come from all over the world. And I would get to just have these deep sort of sideline conversations with them. And I would learn so much. But then I felt like I wasn't putting enough voices on stages. I was limited to the number of voices I could put on my own stages, which was limited. So about 8, might be going on 9 years ago, I stopped producing events and started putting speakers on other people's stages, again, because of the passion to make sure. I don't even care if I don't agree with the voice. And there's times when I don't. People need the data. They need to know what they agree and don't agree. And they can't know that unless they hear all sides. And people are laying awake at night praying for a solution to whatever it is that they're facing. And those solutions are often locked up on the boots on the ground somewhere in some corner of the world. And unless their message gets out there, that those who are the ones who would most resonate with that message are never going to hear it. So through the difficult times, which there were plenty, instead of burning out, instead of letting overwhelm overcome me, I found a way. And these are things that I train now my own speakers and corporate trainers, because it's a rough world and it's highly competitive. It's talk about certainty, uncertainty. It's often uncertain. We can do our best to create income certainty and calendars that we can count on. But I don't even care if you have a 9 to 5. Like, there's no guarantees ever. We all know that, right? With what we all went through as a globe just a handful of years ago. So nothing is guaranteed. How do you navigate this kind of tumultuous waters that is life without burning out, giving up, caving in, those kinds of things? So that was what set me on my journey.
And what a powerful thing. In fact, this week I've had a couple of people very similarly were told that they didn't have much time left on the earth. There was nothing they could do. There was no hope, and God had other plans for them. And I think that that's such an important message, because a lot of times when we're given that information, the fear that sets in, the devil likes to get into our heads and try to really manipulate that, because it's really the only power that the devil has. And it can push us further from God, where we're questioning, where are you? Why is this happening? Instead of leaning into there is a plan and purpose in it. I know that for me, I've struggled in time, and I really hung to the, like, really clung to the Jeremiah 29:11, that his plans were to prosper me, and that he knew better than whatever the circumstances that I was going through, that I didn't know what was on the other side. And I really had to trust and take that next step in faith, which is very hard to do if you're living in the state of fear. And so that's a big thing that my big message in getting out and having different points of view. Yes, it can give us hope when we hear somebody who's overcome something that doctors said that they wouldn't, because there is power in that. And yes, sharing your story and having other people out there to give that hope when, the people who are supposedly know all end all on this earth are just that. They're not, like, that is not God, and he has the final say. And I know that the world that we live in is so chaotic and so crazy. And especially as women, I think we've kind of been taught in society that we need to wear busyness like it's a badge of honor. And I know I have struggled with this. Like, I am a 0 to 100. I'm going to work until I get the thing done. And I realized that, of course, when I was highly stressed and there was lots going on, that would always be the time that my body would be like, let's get sick now. Or, oh, let's have, your neck crick so you can't sleep. And the world would just fall apart. And it was really life-changing for me to realize that when I actually took time to rest and built that breathing room in my schedule, I actually was more productive taking time off than I was when I was, 0 to 100, 18 hours of the day. But that's really hard to do if you're, an overachiever person like I was. So I would love to hear some of the things that you help people that are struggling with that, because it's like we have a message we want to get out there, and yet the stress, the, quest, the
I
never ending noise can be a lot.
the first word that comes to my mind when you set that up was listen. Listen to the guides, because there are guides. And your body is a big one, right? If you're overdoing it and you are near, it's going to protect you by forcing you to slow down. One example of a guide early on in that whole scenario, in that story for me, and I believe that this comes directly from above, but whether or not your listeners are speakers or aspire to be speakers, we have a voice in our life and in our circles, in our atmosphere. And that guide, that voice came from a young man in a wheelchair who overheard the doctor giving my mom and I some really not great news. For whatever reason, he gave it to us in the hallway. I think he was a doctor that was just visiting and leaving, visiting a specialist to see me and then leaving. So there wasn't an office space. I don't know. I was so young. But this news was given to us in the hallway, and this young man in a wheelchair with obvious kind of brain, something going on with his brain, because there was a lot of scars and all of that, overheard it. And he tracked us down in the hospital cafeteria later and rolled up to us and just gave me this word that I won't repeat because I cannot do it without breaking down. And I don't want to break down on your show. Speak from your from your healed scars, not from your open wounds. And even though I'm so thankful and I feel so healthy and so beyond it, just the power of his voice. I was a child. Y- Decades later, I'm still remembering just these few sentences that he shared. We all have that. And essentially, his message in a nutshell was not to give up. Don't take bad news as a sentence. Take it as marching orders that you're going to fight. And I took it to heart, even as a child. And it gave us just that little bit of hope that we needed to continue on. Each person in your audience has that. And when you give, you can't be overwhelmed and near burnout when you are giving. There's something about the selfless act, even when you don't have it in you, of just giving of yourself. I'm not saying overgive and volunteer for everything, but when the opportunity presents itself and you just know in your heart, you're being called to step in for whatever reason. When you do that selfless act, you feel there's just this brand new sense of energy and resolve and wherewithal that just naturally comes from that. And that's how we're created. I don't think we can be an island unto ourselves. And the more we're stressed and we're overwhelmed, what do we want to do? We just want to retreat. We don't want to really be around people. We just want to retreat. And that's kind of one of the worst things that you can do if you want the strength that is kind of built in to the whole ecosystem of how things work.
Well, it's so true. And I think that that became quite evident in 2020. Everybody was locked away.
Sequestered.
And I mean, we actually have more access to people now than ever before because of social media and the internet. And yet the numbers of people who are battling with depression, anxiety, that are feeling loneliness is higher than it's ever been. And so I I think that it is something worth having a conversation about, because you're right. When you are giving and serving others, it is life breathing, because that's the way God made us. And even thinking about, for me, when I was struggling, because I always felt like I've got to give to everybody else. And, I wasn't really taking care of myself in that process, because I had to make sure the kids were alive, and they probably were going to die if I went to the gym. That's really what I used to tell myself. But it took kind of understanding and even looking at the Bible, when the seas were crazy and chaotic. And all of the disciples were freaking out because there was a storm. Like, what was Jesus doing? He was resting. And on the seventh day, God rested. And I'm thinking, well, if they can do that, like, why can't I? Like, I'm not better than them. I'm not better equipped. And if they can do it, so can I. And so I was really giving myself that permission to rest. But even just being connected with other people, I mean, what would you say to someone who knows that they have a message, a testimony, a story that could help others, but they feel unsure, unqualified, afraid to share it? Because I think about that, even thinking like I have kids, adult kids and small kids, and they're always listening to me. And it's always like, well, I do have a message that's going to change somebody's life, even if it is my own kids. But what if you're afraid to speak up with that? What would you say to that person?
Thing I'd say is get over it because you're focusing on yourself. If you know you have a message and you're called to this message and you're looking at yourself, then you are not stepping into your calling. Once it becomes not, I need to put this perfect talk together because I think I'm called and I got to make it perfect. That is a very selfish direction, and it's also a very ineffective direction because you're doing it to look good, to feel like you have a purpose, to feel like you get the praise afterwards, right? Flip the script. Do it imperfect, do it uncertain, and step out afraid. Do it afraid because that's where the data comes. And that's also where the calling clarifies. As you step out, scrappy's the new perfect, right? Nobody wants perfect. They want real. They want authentic. So as you step out in your voice that you don't even exactly know what your voice is just now, just yet, just start where you think you need to start. And very soon you're going to get the data. You're going to see what people are leaning into, what kinds of questions they're asking you, what you all of a sudden within you rises this kind of superpower, which is the spirit, right? Who is just like, yeah, you're getting it. Let's go with this. And each time you do it, that muscle memory becomes stronger and stronger. And you care less about what other people, when you're helping somebody, how self-conscious can you be? Like when you're honestly focused, pardon me, on them and not on you, because you know there's somebody whose life is dependent on your message that day. One thing that they're going to grasp onto that's going to give them the hope or the strategy you're going to be the bridge to the gap that they've been facing, this chasm that they just have not been able to get through. And again, we're created that way. We are created to need each other. We're created to interconnect. And no amount of AI, no amount of Google searches is going to replace you. The way you deliver your message, somebody else could speak the very same words, but it's not going to reach certain people and vice versa, right? So number one, do it scared, step in. And then the other advice I would give is if you have a question, ask it and then let it go. Part of my morning devotionals is I pray, but then I always end with 3 to 5 questions. How am I going to ABC, overcome this thing? What is the best way to whatever? Whatever's just noodling at you, just bothering you and just there, ask it, say it, ask and you receive. So ask the question and then believe that the answer will come in its right timing. And again, it's all about how we're created. Your whole body goes to work at finding that answer all day long in the background. Your eyes see differently, your spirit discerns differently because you've asked the question. You're not holding on to the question and trembling and in angst. Instead, you've asked it. Been given the promise, ask and you will receive, and you let it go. So that's really another way. How am I going to do this talk in a way that's going to affect people the way that they need it? You don't need to figure it out. Just ask the question.
Well, and I think that we can see that often in the Bible where it's not the qualified who are called, he he really
The
helps
scrappy.
us. Yes, that he really helps us do what we need to do if we ask those questions. And it's funny you mentioned that you could be saying the same thing somebody else is saying and someone will hear it differently. My husband and I have this ongoing joke because I will give him advice on something and it kind of is in one ear and out the other, but then his best friend will say the exact same thing and he'll come to me like it's the greatest message he's ever heard. And I'm thinking like, I just told you that. Like, so it's always like, well, if Tim said it, then, now I just need to like funnel everything through Tim for, sound advice. But how can we stay focused on this bigger assignment without letting kind of the busy work of business life, all of those things take over where we miss those opportunities? Because I think that there's many times in my life where the Lord has shown me to reach out, to talk to someone. And it's kind of one of those things that before I was very diligent about quiet time and listening to that voice, that it was like, I'll call them later. And then, week turns into a month and then I haven't spoken to that person for a year. And I think that the busyness of life can really take over. So how can we stay focused?
Actually, yes, it's busyness, but it's voluntary busyness because being busy is the perfect antidote or the perfect, I guess, parallel to avoidance, right? So when you're a high achiever, I am, you are, I'm sure many of your listeners are, we will overcomplicate something that should be very, very simple. And then when it is too simple, we're like, oh, I can do that. So then I can also do this, this, and this, and this. So under promise, over deliver, right? We've heard that. That's not just an outward thing. That's also an inward thing. Let me get this small thing done. I can do this. I can make a quick call. I don't need to get it perfect. I don't have to have a whole script written out. I'm just going to make a quick call. I'm going to start with, hello, how are you? That's all I need to know right now. And I'll be led for the rest. I do not need to pre-script what I'm going to say. I'm just going to, and maybe it's just, hello, how are you? They tell me and we hang up. Maybe I'm not going to accomplish what I think I'm going to. I'm going to let myself be guided. So that is the biggest thing. And I'm preaching to myself because even if you're starting a business, if you're running a home, if you are doing a volunteer project, keep it smaller than you can manage and do it excellently. And when then have that down pat, have that where it can almost run itself and then add on maybe the next layer. I told you I was a producer of very large scale events and there were multiple reasons for me to step away from that and into the role that I have now. One was my mission and my vision, but another one was I was very close to burnout, very close. And my health, I was running health events and my health was never worse. And I'm like, if I kill myself doing these health events, it's not really going to be a great testimony. And it's because like, yeah, I can put on this massive event. We can have a silent auction. We could do an art contest for kids in the community. And I did it all. And there were incredible events, but it was at the cost of my health and well-being. And thereby, those events are no longer. And that was meant to be. There were other reasons. But if you want sustainable, long-lasting effectiveness and impact, start with the core of what has to happen. Keep it simple. And when you see yourself overcomplicating, don't say it's because I'm complex and I'm so brilliant, because I said that to myself, right? People don't see the things the way I do. See it for what it is. It's avoidance. There's something in you that's resisting. Listen to that. Again, a guide, right? Listen to that still small voice that's trying to tell you something. Check in, not every morning, yes, but all throughout the day, check in. Take a few minutes. You have to retreat to a bathroom or something. Just breathe, get quiet. This is the time not to ask questions. Just get still and open yourself to hear. There's a time to speak. There's a time to be quiet and hear and listen and notice. That's it in a nutshell. And I know it seems so simplistic, but the beauty is in the simplicity and the power is in the simplicity.
Yeah, I think that that's such a powerful thing to think about because I can find myself throughout life, whether it's, when I was in the military, I'd often tell people that, nobody gets to their deathbed and says, man, I really wish I would have worked more. That's really not what's important. And yet we can strive for whatever in our work. And yes, we're all put here for a purpose. And at the time, Mine was just more of a career and a paycheck, which was also at the sacrifice of my health, time with my family. So I really had to take my own advice and think like, why am I, killing myself over something in the long run really doesn't make a big like if I died going to work tomorrow, they'd all figure it out. Like I can only be the mom to my kids and the wife to my husband. And if I'm not honoring that gift that the Lord has put me in charge of, like what else are we doing? And so I really had to take this hard look at my life and think about, well, what do I really what's really of value? What is my purpose? And then step out in faith that the Lord was going to bring the finances that were going to come with that. And it's still been kind of a crazy thing, retiring and coming home be with my kids and really trusting that like what I'm doing is making a difference without being over the top with all the things. So I think that for someone maybe who's listening who feels overwhelmed, overcommitted, or unsure of the next step, you could really, I know that you have some words that could really encourage them to kind of bring them back. What are those words?
Lightly. Don't be so hard and heavy on yourself. Like you said, people will figure it out. Your kids are not going to die if you go work out. The company is not going to collapse if for some reason you don't ever show up again. Yes, have value and you are valuable. But I think in the bigger scheme of things, the biggest value is, are you true to yourself and to your creator? And then from that stems your family, and from that stems your community and your profession and all else. But if you neglect your vessel, right? How much good are you for your family? How much good are you for even God if you're neglecting you and basically you're making yourself a mini God? You say people can't survive without me. They can. They may not like it, may cause great injury to them, but they can survive without you. Let's make it so they don't have to, at least not anytime soon. Right. So the biggest thing is first know that, and then check in. Give yourself the few moments, because we can tell ourselves we don't even have that. Right. The world can't live without us, can't survive without us, can't function without us. So we don't even have 5 minutes to retreat to a bathroom to check in with ourselves, to get quiet and listen, to ask the questions and then get quiet and listen. And just only don't focus on the big picture, right? There's another scripture. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. Focus on what's the next best thing I can do to just inch me one step further towards finishing that project that feels overwhelming, or helping that friend where I can't give everything, but I can give a call or send a flower, whatever. A child that's maybe struggling with learning. What's just one thing I can do to help today in this moment, and let the rest take care of itself? If we're worrying about the whole weight of everything, of course we're going to burn out and feel hopeless and helpless, right? Like we're just not enough. I remember as a young single mom, that was the words I would tell myself every day is, I'm not enough. And your body will believe you. Yeah, I'm not a name it and claim it type person, but we are created in a way where words are very, very powerful. Whether we think it or we speak it or we act it, our bodies will believe what we believe and we say and we do. So flip the script. Even if you don't fully believe it, just, I can do this. I really wish I would have known that back then. Instead of me telling myself I'm not enough, I really just wish I would have said, I can do this. I think it would have been a much easier path back then.
And I can really in the same way that I wish that I had figured that out much earlier. So hopefully someone younger than me is listening and can buy this clue earlier than I did. But I think, I host retreats in Costa Rica for women, and the idea around it is to take care of the woman who always kind of puts herself last on the to-do list, which by the way is a little bit of a hard sell because it's hard when you're thinking you're not worth the investment, the time away. And somebody brought up to me that one of the things that might keep someone from going is that they don't trust that their spouse will take care of the kids correctly, that their work will work without them. And it was very eye-opening to me because there was a time in my life where I had to control everything, that no one could do it as good as I could. And what I realized is I was never giving these other people in my life the opportunity to grow, to build into And also for me to grow in the faith that, like, I could let go. I didn't have to control everything. I don't have to be like, I'm not God. And so I kind of just really want to challenge maybe the person that's listening who feels a little bit uncomfortable in realizing, I'm sorry, sis, but you are not God. You are not the end all be all. Like your family will survive without you. The work will get done without you. It may not be the way you want to, but I think that that's also the beauty in God's plans because it rarely looks like we want it to. And in the timeline we want it to, like whatever it is we're praying for or wanting, but it's always better than we could ever ask or imagine if we take that step of faith and go out and do the thing. And I think that that can relate to so many different areas of life. But I know somebody is listening and they're like, yes, I need to connect with you. Maybe they want to get part of your speakers because they have a story. I could actually think of several people I've had on my podcast recently that I'm going to send over your way that would be tremendous in the stories that they have to share. So if you could share with us, how can people get in touch with you and how can you help them?
Thank you for that. And by the way, we're very generous with our thank yous when you refer somebody who becomes a client because it's all go give. You refer, they get the help they're looking for, and it's all a beautiful circle. Okay, if I can just really quick piggyback on something you just said, and then I'll step into that. One of the things that I'm like you, like if I leave, so many things are going to go wrong, and I'm going to have to come home to all these things that are going to go wrong. And I love plants, and one of my biggest things is nobody's going to take care of these plants, right, the way I want them. Really, what you have to ask yourself is, what is the worst that can happen if the worst happens? The worst happens every single time I come back home. Half of my plants are dead. But is that really the end of the world, right? I still had the experience that I needed to have or made the connections that I needed to make. I revive the plants, the ones that I don't, I replace. And we create these walls for ourselves because they seem important. But like you said, they're not always as important as we give them credit for. And I love the way that you said, sometimes we need to let somebody else rise or fall. Give them the opportunity to either make it or not make it. We can't control whether they get the kids to school on time or whatever, but what's the worst that can happen? You get a couple demerits. I don't know. It's all okay because you're worth it, and it's just part of a healthier picture overall. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Those
Well, and in my experience, when I have let other people, namely like my husband, all of a sudden he has like this whole new appreciation for all the things I do. So then it comes home and it's like, oh, let me take that off your plate. I had no idea you were doing that. And then it's like, oh, look at me. I'm being spoiled now. So it is a win-win. I'm telling you.
Effective. No, I love that. How people can get a hold of me, the best and easiest, quickest way is hashtag SpeakPact, speak as in our voice, and pact as in our universal impact together to make the greatest impact with the power of our voice through speaking as possible. So hashtag SpeakPact, PACT, is the quickest, easy. We are everywhere. The other ways is the number one, Antoniette. I'm sure you'll have it in the show notes. I am on all the socials, and it's the number one, Antoniette. I'm most active on LinkedIn, speakpact.com, speakerbooker.com. Like, there's a lot of ways to find me. If you want to find me, it's not hard. Antoniette Roze is a very unique name, but if nothing else, definitely check out our podcast. It is a passion project. And whether or not you are an active speaker now, or even if you're not sure you want to be, there's just so much to gain there as far as being the leader and being empowered in your own biggest vision.
Man, that's so good. And yes, I'll make sure all of that information is in the show notes. This was such a fun and good conversation to really just challenge the idea that we don't have to be burnt out to do things well. And certainly that is not, of the Lord. So I appreciate that insight. And before we jump off, is there anything else that you would want to say to our listeners?
I guess I'll end with this. Know your non-negotiables. Go on your retreat, go on Susan's retreat, bring a pad and paper. When you have a few down moments or just retreat to a park, wherever, get out of your usual space and have a piece of paper with 4 quadrants. One is your non-negotiables of what you absolutely need in your life. The right side would be your non-negotiables of what you absolutely do not want in your life, even if it's in your life right now. maybe a certain job that is just sucking the life out of you, whatever. What are the non-negotiables that you want? You may not even see the path there, but you don't want in your life anymore. Maybe it's constant financial struggle. And you can do this for your personal life and your professional life on one sheet of paper because they are intermingled. There is no difference between personal and professional. It's all you. It's all your life, your one beautiful life and your very limited time on earth. And then the bottom two quadrants, who do you absolutely prioritize and value in your life? And then this is the hardest one. Out of all four of these quadrants, this is the hardest one. Who do you not need in your life? Who's sucking the life out of your life? Who's in your life just out of obligation or because you think they are supposed to be in your life? And sometimes the answers to that's kind of hard. It's family or it's spiritual community, certain people that you feel like, well, no, I'm kind of obligated to keep them in my life. The only You're only obligated to keep God in your life and your immediate family, right? Your nucleus. But outside of that, it's it's obligation or choice. So always surround yourself with those who are where you want to be, whether it's spiritually or just life, joy, vitality, or professionally, but not those who don't want to see you succeed. Because the ones who seemingly love you the most are the ones that don't want you to leave them. They don't even realize they're doing it, but they're trying to hold you back from the success you're called into. This is such a powerful exercise, and it's not a one and done because as you evolve, everything evolves with you. So every 6 months at minimum, do this non-negotiables table exercise, and you will learn more about yourself than you realized that you could. And don't overcomplicate it. Make it super simple and easy. Time yourself if you need to so you can't overthink because I'm one of those. I will overthink. I'll need 5 pages. Just do it all on one sheet of paper and write before you even think about it. And what is true is what's going to come through that pen.
And that is such a good exercise. And I think when I've done this throughout different, seasons of my life, I realized that a lot of the things that were my priorities were not like what I valued the most was not what I was spending time on, and vice versa. Like things that were not important, I was spending lots of time on. And so that is another reason why I love doing retreats and asking women to come get out of your normal whatever, because when you're quiet and still away from the normal day to day, that's when you can really get the most clarity. Every time I go, I get some kind of new download that's life changing. But, in the day to day life, that's not always easy to sit and do. So you really do have to prioritize that. What a fantastic thing to really leave people with thinking because it is such a value add. So hopefully everybody listening is going to take some time to do it because I think they will find it is very eye opening. And I know for even me looking at when I color coded my calendar on things that either I love doing or I don't love doing, things that bring me joy, things that are my priorities. I realized I was spending a lot of time on things that were none of those. And like, well, what can I outsource? Silly example, I don't like doing dishes. So when my husband's gone for long periods of time, you better believe we eat on paper plates because that brings me joy to not do dishes. But it's something as simple as that, like really asking myself and then being okay. And even to your point, whatever comes to your mind first. A lot of times we want to talk ourselves out of whatever that thing is, like what our true heart's desire is. We want to get our mind into that decision and kind of talk ourselves out of it. I did this exercise last year when I was thinking about my retreats and things because it's like, well, it's a really hard sell telling people that they need to go take care of themselves when they're not really used to it. And man, that's just the thing that kept coming out that like I love doing that. I love watching that transformation happen. These women that come year after year after year and watching how different their lives have become because of that, like I can't not do it. So, I mean, even to the point of like you have a voice, you have a purpose, and you really need to lean into that. So, thank you so much for so much good information and a challenge to all of us to really look at what are our non-negotiables. I love that.
Yeah, and it's not kind of a static exercise when you do it. It is a living document, and you're going to see if you listen to it, if you watch for the clues. You're going to see a common thread. I love that you did that with your calendar. You'll see a common thread of what is the nice haves, what's the necessaries, and what's the absolutely unnecessary. Talk about overcoming burnout and overwhelm. Let's remove the riffraff and really hone in and focus on the simple. It's not always easy, but it's the core. And that's where we are. Thank you for having me, Susan. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so good. And I would love to do this again because I feel like there's so many different things we could talk about and chew on. So thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Anytime. Ciao, ciao for now.
Thanks for listening to Faith Over Pharma. If this episode gave you hope, clarity, or helped you look at fertility differently, share it with a friend who's trying to make sense of the waiting and all the conflicting advice. And if you're ready to discover what may be standing between you and the baby you've been praying for, head over to SusanGladstein.com.
Thanks for listening.